The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 15th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But Jesus did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." Jesus answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." Jesus answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord. Yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Okay, do you recall Jesus saying those words to the Pharisees quite a while ago, earlier in Matthew's Gospel? I mean, today we're in chapter 15. This was way back in chapter 9, reflected on this saying in worship at the beginning of June, if you can think back that far. But this is where we've come. Jesus had just called Matthew, at that point, the tax collector, to come and be one of his disciples. And then the next thing that happens is Jesus sits down for dinner with more tax collectors and sinners. And then the Pharisees come in and see him doing that and complain about Jesus doing that. To which point Jesus replies to those Pharisees and says, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." We heard back then that Jesus was recalling the words from the prophet Hosea, who prophesied God's desire for steadfast love and mercy and for God's people to know God, and how those things are more important than the sacrifice and burnt offerings that often are offered without much thought. So here Jesus was encouraging these Pharisees to set down those laws and traditions, to put aside these human desires and failings, and instead find ways to offer words of hope, signs of healing, gifts of mercy. Do the work God intends by reaching out to those outsiders and to the sick, to the sinner. So then in the chapters since then, all these stories we've been hearing over the past few months, Jesus went on to do that kind of work, right? Healing the sick, feeding the hungry, proclaiming the good news to those who need to hear it, all in the name of God. That is, until today. Until Jesus is face to face with this Canaanite woman who is asking, or really she's crying and she's begging to Jesus for mercy, for the healing of her daughter. And we see in this story that even Jesus, the Son of God, fails to do God's work in that moment. Now maybe you're like so many people who hear something like that and think, wait a minute. Whoa, Jesus does not mess up. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus, even in his weakest moments, faced the devil and put him in his place. Jesus has been a witness to God's love. He's healed people. He's performed signs and miracles. He lived his life with such obedience that he willingly died on the cross. Absolutely, yeah, he did all those things. He was fully God, fully divine. But don't we also confess that Jesus, in addition to being fully divine, was also fully human? That's the good news we celebrate at Christmas, right? The incarnation, the person of God putting on human flesh and becoming one with us in this world, walking and dwelling with us. That is Jesus' identity as well, right? We know it's both of those things. Thinking of Jesus just as a perfect teacher and Lord is nice and neat, but I think it misses out on Jesus' ability to learn and grow and change, just as we are called to do. But we know that learning and changing and growing are things that are difficult for us to do. Or more realistically, there are things we try to avoid doing. We try to show love and mercy to others like God has told us and taught us, but like those Pharisees from a few chapters ago, and really like human beings from the beginning of time, we get caught up in the traditions and the rules and the sinfulness of our own way. I mean, that's just our human nature. And as we hear in today's gospel story, even Jesus faces this same human nature. We heard Jesus left that place, the place he had been doing his ministry, and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. So these were cities on the northern side of the country, which was an area known to be filled with Gentiles, unlike the place that he just left where Jesus had been doing his ministry, which was typically populated by mostly Jewish people. And so while he was there, then a Canaanite woman from that region, a.k.a. a Gentile woman, came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David, my daughter is tormented by a demon." Had we heard this story and this woman not been named as a Canaanite or a Gentile, we would have assumed that this story is just like so many others we've been hearing in the gospel, where people hear that Jesus is coming to their city, so they go out, they seek him out for healing for themselves, for family and friends, because they know this is the one who is known to heal. And in those times, Jesus heals everybody. That's what Matthew tells us throughout the gospel. Everyone knows that Jesus has this reputation of healing anyone who comes to him. And as we hear today, even the Gentiles have heard this reputation. So this Canaanite Gentile woman approaches Jesus, as everyone else has done. She pleads for mercy and healing to him, as everyone else has done. And Jesus responds by doing nothing. Literally nothing. Matthew says, but he did not answer her at all. He ignored her. Then the disciples get on board. They come and they urge Jesus, saying, "Send her away. She keeps yelling at us." We know this is not the first time that Jesus' disciples try to protect him, but usually Jesus protests against the disciples and they welcome the one the disciples are trying to keep away. But this time, Jesus responds to those disciples by speaking against the woman who asked for mercy. He said, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." This really wasn't meant to be an excuse. Jesus really did believe that this was his mission that God had given him. We've heard it before in the gospel. When Jesus sends the 12 disciples out in chapter 10, he tells them, gives them instructions to say, go nowhere among the Gentiles, enter no town of the Samaritans, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Jesus understood his ministry to be for the people of Israel, the chosen people of God, not those others, those Gentiles. So Jesus refuses to help. But then it gets worse. The woman further approaches Jesus. She kneels before him and begs, "Lord, help me." And Jesus responds, as we heard, with an insult. It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Not only does Jesus refuse to heal this woman's daughter, he calls her a dog. What do we do with this? There's been much ink spilled over the centuries trying to explain away why Jesus did what he did. Maybe Jesus was tired from all of this journeying he had been doing. I know how I can get when I'm tired. Maybe Jesus was getting weary from so many people asking for healing and all of this work he had been doing. Or maybe he really was defending what he believed his mission from God to be, as we said earlier, and how it was only for the Israelites. Or, the most common explanation I've heard, maybe Jesus was testing the faith of this Gentile woman. He wanted to be sure that this unbeliever, this other person, knew and understood in whose name this work was being done. But we don't know the reason. Jesus doesn't explain why he responds that way, and Matthew doesn't tell us. So we can land on any one of those explanations for why Jesus responds in that way, but I think it's just as safe an assumption to believe that this was Jesus' human side showing through. Even Jesus needs an opportunity to learn and grow in doing God's work. But we hear this woman persisted. She doesn't respond in anger to being called a dog. Rather, she looks at Jesus and says, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Can you imagine the stunned silence that followed this comeback? The boldness to say that even she, an undeserving outsider other, could benefit from a few crumbs of mercy. That there was mercy to spare, right to Jesus' face. The story always brings back a memory for me. When I was a youth director in Maryland, a parent came to me to brag. This woman's daughter had been attending a private Christian school of a different denomination, and while she was in school and went to their chapel services, she couldn't receive communion. And so she approaches the principal to ask why, and the principal explains that you had to be a member of this particular church and denomination to receive. And the mom proudly tells me, she said, without skipping a beat, my daughter says, "But even the dogs get the crumbs that fall from the master's table." The mother was so proud to tell me this story that her daughter knew these stories and could stand up just like that. It didn't change anything, as you can imagine. But here, for this Gentile woman who's speaking with Jesus, that statement changed everything, didn't it? "Woman," Jesus replied to her, "great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed immediately. This outsider woman had the boldness to approach and trust the power of God through Jesus, while at the same time carrying the humbleness of begging for mercy and healing. The power of this woman's statement changed the course of Jesus' ministry. So much so that at the conclusion of the gospel, the commissioning words to the disciples were, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, including Gentiles and outsiders, and anyone and everyone we could ever or even not imagine." I think this is a calling for us. The knowledge that learning and growing and changing is a part of our life of faith. The encouragement of the boldness that we should have when approaching and trusting in the power of God, while also carrying the humility and humbleness of our need for mercy and forgiveness. A reminder of the vastness of God's kingdom and who is a part of it. Because we know that even just a few crumbs of God's mercy truly can change everything. Amen.